conversation with a fellow teacher recently that put a question in my mind about the purpose of literature. And it was a question, the conversation had to do with literature and rhetoric as subjects in a curriculum, and the proper use of literature in the pursuit or in the service of teaching kids how to write and teaching kids how to express themselves. And I don't know, it put me in mind of what I think is probably a common answer to this question: why do we study literature? I mean, let me put it in the form of kind of a thought experiment. Imagine this teaching strategy, this teaching situation. A teacher sits down with a work of American literature, The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, for example, and then proceeds to make a series of assignments to his class or his students having to do with The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And the assignments are designed to do a couple of things to help the students express themselves about ideas. For example, ideas that may come up in A Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne: individualism, sin, repression in the face of an oppressive society, or something like that. And he makes some assignments that require the students to develop their opinions about those topics, repression and sin and individualism, in a formal way that allows them to work on their techniques of persuasion and self-expression. And they do exercises, written exercises, where they practice talking clearly and expressing themselves clearly about individualism and repression and society and those sorts of things. And in the end, they write a great essay about individualism and repression in society. And the teacher looks up at the end and says, "This has been a fabulous experience. Congratulations, you have now done Nathaniel Hawthorne's A Scarlet Letter." And as we're talking about this, the idea sneaks into the side of my mind that there is somebody whose opinion about repression and individualism and a legalistic society has not been consulted. And of course, that person is Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was left out of the discussion from an early point when the attention of the students turned toward expressing their own opinions about that topic. And I'm not saying that those exercises were a waste of time. They certainly were not.
No, not if we're talking about the study of rhetoric instead of the study of Nathaniel Hawthorne's
right, exactly.
book of literature.
Exactly. And so the pursuit of self-expression and modulated and powerful and gracious self-expression, and the sanctioning of, the training in sanctioned opinions about topics like repression and individualism, those are all noble and laudable things. Mm-hmm. But those conversations provide an answer to the question, why do we study literature, that I think is worthy of a debate. It's debatable whether that is the main or best reason to study literature, because they boil down to this answer. We study literature because we can use it as an opportunity or as an occasion to practice expressing our own opinions. That's what literature is primarily good for. It provides students with an occasion to practice expressing their own opinions about topics that the teachers want them to express sanctioned opinions about.
Which it certainly is. That's a derivative element. You know, it's a fringe benefit. But if you make that the sum total of your literary study, your literary experience is going to be wanting, because you won't have necessarily spent much time thinking about what the author was wanting to say. You're too busy looking for opportunities to express yourself.
Right.
Too busy talking.
Right.
Not busy enough listening.
Yes, and I think that's a good way to put it. And I would never ever say that is a waste of time, or that should not be pursued, because Lord knows one of the main points of an education is to learn your own mind and be able to express yourself clearly,
yes, absolutely,
with grace and eloquence and power, as we're always talking about. However, it does leave open the question of, is there something having to do specifically with Nathaniel Hawthorne, not with my 11th grader, with Nathaniel Hawthorne's opinions about individualism and repression in society that we haven't touched yet, that my 11th grader hasn't had the chance to experience or hasn't taken the opportunity of imbibing? Are we missing something if rhetorical purposes are the reason we study literature?
You mean the only reason we study literature?
Yeah, or the primary ones, or the first ones.
Yes. Yeah, I think the fact that we talk about that being the rhetoric, that's a rhetoric exercise, right? It's a bit of a tell, because we have to begin with the grammar of every subject, and we begin with the grammar not just within the subject, but within each novel. We have to begin with the grammar, right? We have to begin by asking the elementary questions that the author wants us to ask to come alongside him and discover what he's embedded, because reading is about discovery, right? It's about discovery. It's not about invention. Somebody else invented that thing that you, as a reader, get to discover. And in order to discover it, you have to put your hand over your mouth and stop talking. You've got to listen. You've got to pay really close attention if you're a reader. I mean, it's hard enough to listen when you've got a person in front of you who's delivering, his speech or what have you. But we're not listening to a speech. We're engaging in an art form. We're listening really carefully to an artist who has embedded his information in his art form. And he's not necessarily standing there at our shoulder. He's an absent, right? An absent speaker. And so it requires all of our focus. We have to pay really close attention to the means, the vehicle that he's chosen, the kind of art. Are we looking at a novel? Are we looking at a satire? Are we looking at, what are we looking at? Is it a poem?
Well, now hang on though. These are questions, these are answers to the question, how do we study literature? Not answers to the question, why do we study literature? And I think I want to start with that first one, because the answer that I'm sort of using as a straw man to get this conversation going is, we study literature in order to practice our skills of self-expression.
We've already exploded that, though.
I know, but I'm talking about what the alternative is. What is the alternative? Why is it that we do instead?
I'm sorry, I thought that was assumed.
Oh no, my goodness, love.
Because if we're listening, what are we listening for? It's because art is actually a means of expression, and the artist was expressing himself. Our job as readers is to discover what he thought, not to express what we think.
Yes, I like the way you put it. I wanted to say that something not as well as that literature has more in common with symphony, orchestral music than with a speech class.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
the proper way to engage in orchestral music is to listen. And
receive it
is to receive. Yeah, that's right. And the highest purpose to which literature can be put is some form of listening, some form of reading as listening, as opposed to reading as speaking.